Greetings. Welcome to the Lessons in Leadership series. Today, I'm very honored to welcome Mr. Alec Burger, an illustrious business leader, to our series. Till recently, Alec was president and CEO of GE Capital and also served as the chairman of GE Capital Aviation Services. With his leadership role at GE Capital, Alec was actually responsible for operations in over 34 countries and managed assets to the tune of about $150 billion. Alex has a very interesting background. Grew up in London, came here as a young person, did his undergraduate education at Trinity, and then an MBA from Northeastern University. Alec also serves as a director on the board of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. So Alec, welcome. Thank you for making the time to do this.
Raj, I've been looking forward to this and appreciate the opportunity and look forward to the discussion.
Perfect. So I wanted to start off with your formative influences, Alec. Obviously, you were born in London. You came here as you came here for high school, if I remember.
Yep.
So what was that prompt, if you will, that made you come from London to the US, do high school here, undergraduate here, etc.? Could you talk a little bit about your formative influences in the UK and then this transition into the US?
Well, Raj, one thing is, as you can imagine, at the age of 13, I didn't get a vote in the decision to move over to the US, but my mother was British, father American. And, I think in many respects, part of the formative part of my background was just learning to get along with a lot of different kids at that point. I went to boarding school at 8 years old in England. You're in a dorm with 35 of your best friends, and just the whole integration element. And then I think coming over to the US at 13 was a pretty significant culture shock in the 70s. But again, you sort of have to go through the learning of how to, form new relationships. I think it clearly, if you've got a comfort zone at the age of 13, it kind of gets you out of that. So I think in many respects, a lot of my journey has been having to figure out how to deal with, different groups of people, different environments.
Fantastic, Alec. And one of the things you and I have in common is that both of us have undergraduate degrees in mechanical engineering.
Yep.
So obviously you start off as a mechanical engineer at Trinity and then transition to a business career. Did your background in mechanical engineering help you in your business career?
No question. I think that, I'm not sure I ever really believed that mechanical engineering was going to be the home for me for a 35, 40-year career. But I think that the problem-solving discipline that you get out of mechanical engineering was fantastic. And then I think we're going to talk more about it, obviously, later on. But I think going to business school at Northeastern, I think was a tremendous pivot from a career that started down more of a technical path. And Northeastern really was, I think, hugely influential in terms of me moving more towards sort of a business and in my case, sort of financial services path.
So after your mechanical engineering, you were at Cabot, right? And then what prompted this decision for you to go for an MBA? Because there are a lot of people who are in technical disciplines, etc. So I wanted to kind of probe your mind on what prompted you. You were a good mechanical engineer, you were in a good job. What was that transition for?
I think I always felt like I wanted to have the engineering as a platform. And at the same time, I wanted to be more of a potentially sort of generalist, general manager track. And, quite frankly, at the time, I think it was just harder to make that move without having something like a business degree to, in effect, make an investment in yourself. That really was the logic is, continue to work. I was working full time while I got the MBA at Northeastern. I'm not sure I'd be able to do that again today, just in terms of the kind of the balance, the demands that both put on you. But I think it was a sort of a means to an end. And I think just some of the relationships that I built through the Northeastern program, even today, and the relationship that you and I have built, have really added to sort of the richness of sort of a career and fabric.
No, that's terrific. And then after your MBA, you start off at Bain, and then you transition to GE in 1991 as a junior analyst. So could you talk us through your journey at Bain and what prompted you to seek a career transition to GE? What did you see in GE?
So Raj, I'd say that one of the great expressions, I think, is that sort of all careers can look better in the rearview mirror,
right?
and not everything can be planned out in a perfect sort of process map. I at the time when I was getting my MBA at Northeastern, was intrigued by Bain. I actually went in a financial planning role. I was in FP&A. I really, built a very strong relationship with one of the partners there, who convinced me to consider going into the consulting side of Bain. So I, really went into it, the consulting process, the interview process, exhaustive process, and ended up getting a job as a full-blown management consultant. And then, as you and I have talked in the past, after about 18 months, this was back in 1990, pretty significant financial downturn, and I was either fortunate or unfortunate, depending on which way you look at it, to be laid off from Bain. And to me, that was one of the formative elements in my career, where I had thought that it was a sort of a tremendous launching point to become a consultant at Bain, and then 18 months later, you're dealing with being laid off in not a very good financial climate. And I really at the time focused on a couple of companies, GE being the primary target, because they had a great strategic planning group and a great way for consultants to come in. And so, I had a fairly exhaustive job search, but ended up at GE in their group called Corporate Business Development. And as you know, and we'll talk more about it, I ended up building a 30-year career there. And again, not necessarily something that you plan on day one, nor do I think, looking back on it, was it linear, but I think was a function of, there's no question that in the end, most good things are born out of, some form of adversity or difficulty that you have to, discomfort to get to the other side.
Yes, and as I said earlier, you joined GE in 1991. You become an officer in 2007. By all accounts, you have had an extraordinarily distinguished career at GE. The thing that struck me, Alec, when I looked at your resume, was that you have led in North America, you've led in Europe, you have had business development experience, you've had leadership experience, you've had acquisitions experience, remarkably successful across multiple things. So I wanted to start off at a philosophical level. We talk about your 3 decades experience at GE. What was it like at GE, starting off as a junior analyst and rise through the ranks? When you do a self-reflection, a rear view, looking into the rear view mirror, what is it that you think enabled you to have this remarkable rise within GE? And as you said, you've probably faced a lot of adversities and so on. You've managed them very well, etc. Yeah. But could you shed some light on what made the whole thing tick for you?
Yeah, I'd say there's 2 or 3 things that really come to mind. One is, and I think this is a huge deal, it's just, even though I had 30 years with one company, I did a lot of different roles along the way. And I think this concept of getting outside of your comfort zone is hugely important. So, and again, not all of it was planned, but my first role in back in 1993 when I first went to GE Capital, I applied for a job to be head of business development for an equipment leasing business working over in Europe. And I had never basically been in business development. I've never worked in Europe, and I didn't really know anything about financial services. But I put myself in a position where I was willing to take the personal risk. I was fortunate that my wife was willing to go along too, and
Sure.
on that journey. So I think finding something that is going to challenge you, get you out of your comfort zone, is one of the very few ways that it also allows you to build self-confidence. Doing something that you didn't think that you could do or you've done before. So that's one part of it. The second part of it, which I think people really underestimate, is just how important your network is.
Right.
And related to that is your brand. I mean, your network is something that I to this day feel like I work on every single day. Making new connections, fostering existing connections. That is something that you can control. And look, I think LinkedIn is an example, very powerful, but it's not the end all be all, right? I mean, you've got to make sure you are building those relationships. So that's sort of the second part of it. And the third part, Raj, is probably just being ruthless at prioritizing. And I really do mean ruthless in a way where, as you climb in any, organization, whatever that looks like, you're going to have so many competing demands on your time. Right. And I think prioritizing, and at the end of the day, you've got to be viewed as somebody that is, ultimately winning more than losing, and doing the deals that work, being a good leader. But if there's one thing I would just make, I think going back to my first point, inertia can be a killer. And right. don't allow the inertia to kill you. Make sure that if you're not feeling discomfort every now and again, you're just not learning.
Yes. And, when you talk about networking, a great point for all our students who are watching: network, but network with purpose. It's not just taking a business card, etc. But the other thing that you said, Alec, which struck me, was how your range of responsibilities in different units actually made you and shaped you into the leader you are. So one thing that I take from your career is challenge the status quo, get out of your comfort zone. That is what is going to make you a great leader. In that vein, I want to go back to your GE Capital real estate stint. And one of the things that I read in your bio while you were managing that $38 billion portfolio is about a strategic disposition that you were involved in, you led, which actually led to the transformation of GE Capital, if you will. Could you shed some light on that strategic disposition? How did you approach it? Because this is a radical move, if you will. So how did you approach it? And more importantly, what made you think it was going to be successful?
Well, so again, back in 2015, GE made a decision to radically shrink its financial services businesses. And, the real estate business was, had been very successful. It had a very tough cycle during the financial crisis. And Raj, is almost, it's sort of emblematic of sort of, career and having to be willing to roll with the punches, because back in 2015, I was running the GE's real estate business. In my mind, that was almost the dream job, extremely international, both a lending business as well as a direct owner of real estate. And I got a phone call saying that we wanted to shrink GE Capital, and that we needed to kind of the proof point for our investors was to demonstrate that we could sell GE real estate. So I had a very, very strong relationship with the Blackstone team at the time. I called John Gray at Blackstone, And within basically from that phone call to 6 weeks later, we had an announceable deal that we were selling really the balance of the lending as well as the equity business to Blackstone. And that was extremely difficult for me because I love the business. I love the team. It was more of an asset deal than a platform deal. The team wasn't going with it. But again, it's something that we had to do. And the team did an amazing job of hanging together through the closing process, even though we knew that we were in effect collectively working our way out of jobs at the time. So, again, tremendous learning. I think born out of Raj, the networking and the relationship that we built with Blackstone.
Yeah, and then one of the things that I want to highlight to our audience today is there's been a common theme in what you've been saying, Alec, in terms of networking, in terms of utilizing the talent. But at the end of the day, it's just not networking for networking, but it's the relationships that you build that actually help you through your both professional and personal lives, etc. One thing that I want to focus on, again, a remarkable thing in your CV, and you and I have spoken about it, is the fact that I would say when I look at your resume, you've made so many successful acquisitions for GE, and that is not an easy thing to do for any manager when you're thinking about an acquisition, etc. Obviously, there is a DNA on or a culture on the part of the acquiree, and there is a culture for GE, etc. So there are many things beyond the capabilities that lead to the integration of the two companies, etc. So what do you spot in an acquisition? What makes a successful acquisition? Can you unpack that skill that you have developed for us?
I'd say there are a couple of things, and as you pointed out, the world is littered with very unsuccessful acquisitions.
Right.
And I'd say if I look back over the journey I've had, I think there's an element of fortune, right? I think that there's an element, understanding what the cycle is going to be. There are very few people that truly knew that the global financial crisis was around the corner. There's nobody that basically predicted that 2020 would be just, a tsunami of COVID. Having said that, I think the two things that strike me are, one is the team, and always make sure that you've got good people around you, that you're listening to the team in terms of, the inputs on a particular opportunity that you're looking at. So that's a key part of it. And I think the second mistake that I think people make is that they fall in love with deals, and then sort of an element of deal heat where you get to a certain point where I think you lose the ability to look almost objectively as to whether something is still a good deal. And I think we're fortunate that, with almost no exceptions, you have an opportunity until the deal is signed. You've got to make sure that you remain objective, because everybody wants to do the next big deal. But at the end of the day, living with the next big deal, which ends up being a complete dud, you'll live with that pain for a very long time.
Right. I want to slightly probe deeper into that answer, Alec, because you rightfully said, hey, till the deal is done, be objective. But a lot of times you fall in love with that baby, right? I mean, and therefore you want that deal to be done because obviously you started off thinking this is going to be amazing for the company, etc.
Yeah.
So how did you ensure from a mental perspective that you remained objective, and that when you strayed, that you always could come back to that objectivity? How did you do that?
In this case, you got to, this isn't about ego. You're putting the company first. And Raja, one of the great stories was when I actually first went to real estate. We were acquiring at the time, a very large publicly traded company, and I was alone. It was close to Christmas, and we were negotiating about to sign the deal. And I was given a schedule of the fees that the seller basically wanted to have in terms of legal fees, in terms of investment banking fees, and it was quite frankly outrageous. And I called up at the time the CEO of GE Capital. I said, "Look, I don't think we should do this deal." And it was literally half an hour before signing the deal, and it was a multiple $billion deal. But I just felt like it was the wrong thing for the company to kind of, in effect, be held hostage at the end with these large fees. And at that night, they agreed to cut the fees in half, and we signed the deal. And so I think I'll always remember that, because it was a feeling of, I knew that it was important to me personally to get the deal done, but yet I was happy to walk away from it, just given what I thought was sort of the egregious nature of the fees that were getting discussed. So I think ego, plays a very big role in, I think, a lot of M&A in general. So making sure that you're still, harnessing the inputs of the team around you, and just recognize that I think you've got to force yourself to be objective. And what started off as a great deal when you first thought about it, make sure it's still a great deal when you're about to sign it.
Got it. No, that's phenomenal advice, Alec, to have that perspective of company centricity, and also in some cases at junior levels, maybe have a mentor that you can bounce ideas off of and keep you on that, on that path, if you will. One of the things, as we have talked about, Alec, is you are very people-centric, and you always, you are very funny, you're humorous, there is a personal aspect, a personal charm to your leadership. So I wanted to ask you, as you are thinking about young people coming through the ranks, etc., what advice would you give them to have a successful career, however they might define success? What are the capabilities, attributes that they should build in order to have a successful stint at whatever they choose to do?
Yeah, I think on one hand, I'd encourage people to, and this doesn't work, Raj, across the board, but right. I think people to go broader initially in their careers, kind of have it really be sort of a journey of learning.
Yeah.
I think you touched on the mentorship side of it. I mean, mentors don't last a lifetime.
Right.
I mean, maybe occasionally that they do, but find out who can, help you in the broadest sense, right? So that's
right.
That's a big part of it. I think there's another part of this where people sort of underestimate almost the power of pay it forward.
Correct.
Stop looking for, what is it that my organization can do for me, or what my mentors. Just make sure that even at the kind of the more junior levels, that you're figuring out a way where you can, kind of help people in the in the journey. And then the last thing I would say, when I am interviewing people, over the years, I think you have to be able to articulate a goal.
Right.
Where do you want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? You and I both know that is likely, almost definitely going to change.
Right.
But I think people want to see that you've got a vision and a goal for, where you want to get to, and what does that look like? So mentor, goal, and, make sure that you're sort of building a strong sense of community along the way.
Got it. So, again, you and I have talked about it. One of the things that when I talk to young people, I always say to them, learn to question well. Don't accept anything that you see or read as gospel. Learn to, question the status quo, as you have done in your career right through, yeah. Especially when you talk about willing to break off a deal half an hour before. To me, that is stunning courage, and so on. So you are a leader. There is a junior analyst who's working with you, etc., who's scared of questioning your decision. because you are Yoda to this person, right? You've had an illustrious career, etc. So, and this is a question I receive often, Alec. So I wanted to get your perspective on this. How do you encourage young people to question conventional wisdom, etc.? Uh, because there is an element of fear as they think through how to express it to their bosses, etc. So how would you approach it?
I'd say, first of all, I'd like to think that one of the things I did okay as a leader was to have an environment where people could speak up.
Right.
And part of it was having an environment where I think people felt like, we were serious in terms of getting results, but there was an element of fun and sort of casualness in terms of how the interactions were. And I think that the leader, the managers got to create an environment where it's safe for anybody to speak up. You've got to, one of the least rewarding experiences I think I had as an employee was working for somebody that over maybe a 3-year period never said, "So Alec, what do you think?" One of the most empowering things that can happen to you as an employee is when your manager says, "Alec, what do you think?" And so I'd like to think that, look, it's a two-way street. As the junior analyst, and if you see something that just doesn't feel right, you've got to basically have the courage to put your hand up and say, "Look, I think we're going down the wrong path." But the reality is that if sadly, if the manager / leader doesn't want to listen, it just kind of is what it is. And then at that point, the junior analyst has got to say, is this the kind of company that I want to be part of? And I feel very fortunate that when I think back from the most junior positions to where I ended up my career at GE, I think there was always a feeling where your voice really did matter. You had a seat at the table, and that was worth a lot just in terms of personal growth and experience.
Got it. So one question that people ask me often, young people, and I always tell people, hey, develop a global mindset, develop cultural agility. If you get an opportunity to study abroad, work abroad, please do it, especially early in your career. And you were raised in London, you came here, and then you again went back to Dublin.
Yep.
Could you talk a little bit?
Actually, Shannon.
Okay, Shannon. Yeah.
Yep.
So could you talk a little bit about the importance of cultural agility for young people? And despite the fact that you grew up in Europe, obviously the professional stint might have been different because you had been in the US in the professional environment here for a long time, etc. Was there a cultural adjustment for you in terms of working there? How did you navigate? Any advice for young people as they are thinking about inculcating this global mindset?
I think a lot of, it's sort of, I think there are a lot of people that are naturally perhaps more, adept at integrating, working across, different cultures, different nationalities. I know for myself that it's something that I always embraced and that really enjoyed. The last role that I had was on the aircraft leasing side.
Sure.
Incredibly global business with offices of scale in Singapore and Dubai, obviously in Ireland and the US and Latin America. And for me, I just get an enormous amount of energy out of it. And I think that people really appreciate and understand if you are trying to understand their culture. And the worst thing we could do, I think, is and I've got dual nationality between, as you know, between the US and the UK. Right. And I think the worst thing that you can do is just sort of try to force your particular view of the world on other cultures. So, it's going to be interesting to see how the pandemic is going to change how people think about travel. For me, I always found travel was an amazing, means to an end in terms of understanding what those cultures look like and being able to sit face to face with the teams, all around the world. But I would encourage people to find ways to have that richness of experience. And Raj, one of the things that I'm actually most excited and passionate about Northeastern is just what a incredible job the university has continued to do as not just being relevant, but being a leader in terms of driving diversity, driving a global viewpoint. And I think it's something that, quite frankly, that you and the team should feel extremely proud about.
Thank you. And one optimistic perspective is we are seeing the numbers for the fall 21 class, Alec. Applications for international programs have gone through the roof. So people are, because there was a school of thought that said COVID is going to make people look inward. From our applications, we are not seeing it. Application numbers for international studies are phenomenal, etc. So since you touched upon COVID, I wanted to get your perspective on the following, and especially as somebody who led through the 2008 recession, etc. Obviously COVID is different, but a mega global crisis is the same. And so I wanted to get your perspective, given your expertise in aviation, given your expertise in commercial real estate, as to how you see the post-COVID world looking like for aviation and commercial real estate.
So, one thing is I'd have to give you is a forewarning, and I think you already know this. I mean, I'm wired as an optimist, and I'm not sure I can really change that at this point. But I am very bullish on the aviation sector longer term.
Right.
I think when you look at just how much of different parts of the world are just starting to have enough income where they can start thinking about flying.
Yeah.
I can't tell you that business travel will be as robust as it was before, but I think when you look 2-3 years out, the sheer number of people flying will be greater than it was pre-pandemic. So I think that's going to be good. And I think part of this is going to be, I think people are so hungry to be able to have the next experience, the next family reunion, the next, international adventure. So I think that's good. I think the office thing has been really interesting because, I know for myself, I was not somebody that was a natural or well-versed in Zooming, Microsoft Teams, FaceTiming. And the reality is that this has proven that you can actually build relationships.
Yes.
That you can be productive.
Yes.
Far more so than we could ever have dreamed of pre-COVID. Having said that, I think people really miss elements of the office. So if I thought 6 months ago, maybe the office is completely dead, I don't feel that anymore. I think whether it's, bringing new talent into the organization, whether it's the debating issues, I still think there's going to be a need for physical office space. I think the concept of 5 days a week, people commuting into an office, though, I do tend to think that those days are over. So I think it's kind of exciting. I think we're going to have the best of both worlds when it comes to probably the office environment. People will have more physical flexibility, but at the same time, I would not bet against companies wanting to have 2-3 days a week where you sort of know that you've got the team in person in the office.
So let me ask you, you talked eloquently about the future of office. What do you think about the future of work? Do you see a major difference in how people are going to approach work in the future post-COVID pandemic?
I think so. I think that, well, I think technology has already meant that sort of, there's a lot of work that is, constantly coming at you. I think that sort of the divide between sort of the physical world and virtual world is obviously getting less.
Correct.
And I think the trends, though, are likely continue of what I've seen, even with, I've got 2 sons. I think that I didn't go to GE thinking I was going to stay 30 years there. It just happened that there were interesting opportunities. I think that is likely just to be something that's very unusual going forward. So I think people are going to have more options, because you can take a job and not necessarily have to move to that geography.
Got it.
I think it's just going to be easier. People are going to have even more mobility, and again, I think that's going to be a sort of an exciting outcome from this.
Yeah, actually, I'm reminded of a conversation with a former chairman of a large Boston corporation. So I was asking him about right at the time COVID was intensifying in the US, and he said he didn't think of himself as the leader of a financial services company. He thought himself as a technology company that operated in financial services, and that had huge impact in terms of talent acquisition and how people are going to view the future of work, etc. Kind of completely aligns with your perspective. Now I want to shift gears, Alec, and move to a slightly personal question, because I saw on your CV, and I highlighted it early on, is your role with the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. So I wanted to get your perspective. What prompted you to get involved? Could you talk a little bit about your passion for this society?
I mean, I think, it probably goes without saying that if you've had, reasonable success in a career, you have a platform. And I would just say it's almost shame on you if you're not then using that to help an organization or people that, matters to you. And, Raj, my father suffered with MS for 40 years.
Wow.
I kind of came into the MS Society where I started just actually doing some of these sponsored walks, raising money that way. And then I ended up, being convinced to be the vice chairman of the Connecticut MS Society.
Right.
And I've gotten an enormous amount back out of that. We, one of the major events of the year has been a big fundraising dinner. And again, it sort of ties back to the networking. I mean, it turns out you really get a pretty good view as to who your friends are when you're asking them for money to support one of these causes. So I would say that for me, my advice would be find something that matters to you. It's got to really directly matter to you. And the MS Society, having seen that, quite frankly, the courage that my father always had through it, the way his resiliency, I think, was, really a huge element of kind of who I became.
Got it.
And then it's been I would say, a real luxury to have been part of the MS Society and find a, relatively small way to, to give back to that group.
Well, that's fantastic, Alec. Especially if you've seen your father, 40 years of multiple sclerosis, the lessons of his adversity, obviously that must have shaped you tremendously as a leader, and we can see it. So on a lighter note, I know we have another thing in common. We are both major cricket fans.
Yeah.
And by the way, congratulations on England winning the World Cup in cricket last year.
I know that's very difficult for you to say that. So I agree.
Yeah. So I remember you talking to me about a souvenir that you have in your house. Could you talk a little bit about your interest in cricket and the fact that you are still interested in cricket and your passion for the game?
Sports lasts a lifetime. I mean, I've always enjoyed personally playing tennis. I'm a pretty awful golfer, but I sort of enjoy the social side of it. Cricket is something that I grew up playing. And again, I think it's actually what I love about it is the fact that you and I can have this banter. I told you that I went to an England, India international in the World Cup. It was just, we took some customers actually from Indigo, and it was just a fantastic day. And so for me, look, it's not life and death, although some people would disagree on that when it comes to cricket. For me, it's just the I think it adds to the sort of the richness of your life. And so I love cricket, love rugby. I'm actually a huge NFL fan too, although my team has not been doing too well recently. But it's something you touch a lot of people with different sports.
Yeah, no, that is fantastic, Alec. It is one of my wishes, and hopefully 2021 or 2022 will make that work. You and I should watch an Indian Premier League game together. That will be phenomenal.
Give me the time and the date, and I'll be there.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Alec. This was fantastic, very, very informative and insightful conversation. And thank you for your leadership. And more importantly, thank you for being such a wonderful ambassador for D'Amore-McKim and Northeastern. Thank you.
I'm looking forward, as you know, Dave, kind of continuing to find ways to help and promote in the world in the future. And it is any of you that have actually watched this, I truly hope that we get a chance to meet in person.
Absolutely.
And Raj, thank you again for the opportunity to do this.
Perfect. Thank you, Alec. Much appreciated.
Thank you.